cover?
They all received their contracted amount of time for lunch. They are not scheduled for duties. But our lunch time for a grade is 50 minutes, 25 which they are always free. They are not assigned to duty. 25 minutes they may be assigned to duty. Others may be assigned to duty at, may be assigned a duty before school or at a different recess. But there are some teachers that then don't have that time. They have their own free time to eat their own lunch. Then they don't have time to meet with students. And that was what we were trying to address last year.
Okay. I know a big concern for me, especially since I was appointed to the board, was helping to alleviate some of the workload for teachers. So it seems like that's something that could help and at least worth looking into later on. Could we add that to the parking lot wish list? What are we? Sure. Yeah, just something to review later on down the road, see if that's something we could do. Thank you.
Don't go far, Mr. Whitfield. They may have questions for me that I can't answer yet. Good evening. As you know, I'm just here tonight to help Steve present for the Martell key highlights and budget changes for the upcoming school year. As you know, aside from the obvious key highlights, we'll have a new assistant principal there along with myself as new administration. And so in preparing for this process, Mr. Whitfield and I did talk and think about, what his thoughts were and what he and his staff were proposing should be added to the budget. And then I shared my thoughts with him. And so I just wanted you to know this does come from both of us, even though I'm presenting. And so just a couple of quick highlights this year, and Sarah Rent, my assistant principal, will talk further about this first bullet when we present on Longley, just to share with you the work that both teachers and ed techs from both buildings have done this year for professional development as we prepare for the opening of the Connors Elementary School, which has been a great experience, hopefully, for the staff, and I know it has for myself this year, getting to know some of the Martell staff. And then the other key highlight, excuse me, is we're looking to really, in an effort to really focus on teaching and learning in a creative way at both Longley and Martell, I want the board to know that we're going to be adding an intervention block at Martell within their schedule for next year, which is in alignment with many of the schools here in Lewiston that we do, so that we can provide more enrichment opportunities for kids and more interventions for kids to really focus on individual needs. And again, that links in as well with our PBL work and standards kids either need extra help on or are advanced in. And so that leads me to some of our proposed budget additions. The first thing is we're looking and we're asking for a STEM teacher to be shared between Martell and Longley. We would schedule them as one of our unified arts in the Unified Arts block. Martell and Longley now share Unified Arts teachers, again, in an effort because those teachers will come together when Connors opens. And so at the Connors School, we also have a beautiful STEM lab being built as we speak. And so this position, again, I believe a teaching position is imperative for this position because my vision is that we have the teacher this year at Martell and Longley, and then that person also works collaboratively with the rest of the teaching staff to make sure the science, math, technology standards are really being covered across grade levels. And there's some uniformity and some intentionality around that. The other thing you may wonder, I know Farwell's had a lot of success with having a STEM Ed Tech 3 run that program, although my experience the last couple of years has been that Longley has a hard time finding really quality ed techs, and I think it takes time, and I think we'd be more successful finding top-notch math or science teacher for this position for our kids, and our kids definitely deserve to be engaged in this way. The other piece I wanted to throw in here while speaking on behalf of Martel is my vision is I know the middle school's doing some exponentiary learning. I see this position as a teaching position, also maybe us moving forward in a couple of years once Connors is open, doing some of that at the elementary level as well, and I envision this teacher being a leader in that work. We're asking for a new another new teaching position, response to intervention teacher. This is a position that Steve is very committed to, and I am as well, in terms of it being a big need at Martel School. They have many. This teacher would provide support to students, and also I see it as being a person who can help with the school-wide RTI response to intervention efforts in terms of coordinating data, meeting with teams, along with the administrators, but also working with students who struggle, who aren't in special ed. The goal of an RTI teacher is to help us try more things for kids that they can be, to prove that they can be successful before we have to go to referral for them. And then the next 3 bullet items under Article 1 are all related to the new teaching positions that we're asking for. The instructional equipment would be for materials, desks, and things like that, chairs, desks that the RTI position would need. Now, you did speak, I know Steve mentioned that he doesn't have a physical classroom for a teacher. He said that a few minutes ago, but he does have a plan. And so, do you want to? I think I know what the plan is, but did you mind sharing?
Well, we have one room where we have put some money into the budget to make that an acceptable place for that type of program, and it's under Mr. Turcotte's maintenance budget for a few $1,000s to, I don't want to use the word renovate, but to prepare one area for this teacher if we're successful in making it through the budget with that position. And speaking of that, we, as Christy said, one of the places this person would serve would be for students who are not identified as special ed but are struggling either with academics or with behavior. And particularly we had a group of 5 students that came in kindergarten. A couple of them had never been to pre-K. A couple of them had only been to pre-K for a few days the previous year, and none of them were identified as special ed. And we worked through that process, and it took us a good half of the year to get each one of those students in the place that is appropriate for them. A couple of them became special education students. A couple of them are back in the regular classroom. So it has worked both ways. We saw what we could do and what we could not do in regular ed, and then we had those students referred. And then other students, we got those students up to the place where they could go to this regular ed room. And we would see that person doing the job. What we did for the half of the year was pretty much a program by committee. We were stealing people from one area to fill in and do that. So it is a real need.
Thank you. And I will say that there are RTI teaching positions or programs like this in a couple of our other elementary schools, and they've been very successful from what I understand. Montello and McMahon are 2 that I know. Okay.
Can you just go into that more? What do you mean by that they're successful? What,
sure.
And what does it do for the budget one way or the other?
So I guess when I say successful, I'm sorry, I think about kids. And I think about the kids being successful and being able to access their education in a way that they might not be able to if they were in the mainstream or thinking about kids who struggle with, okay, so now I'm going to get on my soapbox. Kids who have trauma backgrounds or come from high-stress homes, we see they have a hard time regulating their behavior a lot of times, also have trouble learning because of the way certain situations in their lives have impacted their brain development. And so as schools, we now need to look at kids differently and be creative about how we give them supports, because not all kids belong in special ed. Not all kids who have high-stress, traumatic backgrounds have a disability. And so, so that this is the kind of program that I think administrators and teachers become very creative and thinking outside the box in terms of supporting kids. So you have to have a teacher or a person, a body, human, capacity to be able to do that for kids. I hope that answers your question. And so when I say successful, I'm really talking about, I know that kids they're learning, they're in classrooms. I don't have the data, though, to show that maybe suspensions are lower or things like that. It's a really big conversation. I'd love to talk further with you about it.
I will have more questions. I'll let you finish. Though,
Okay.
so.
Okay. Okay, sorry. Sorry. Okay. Did you hear Amber? She'd be happy to speak about it when they're presenting tonight, too. That'd be great. And then in Article 5, we're asking, this is one thing I have asked for as a new administrator that's been new to Martell, been charged with bringing 2 teams of colleagues, teachers to different schools who've had very different experiences in professional development up until this date because of just our histories in Lewiston, Longley being a priority school and having access to different professional development than Martell necessarily being a focus school. This is one area that I really am hopeful to have some funding to be able to continue some further professional development for the Martell staff to sort of get both groups more on the same page. And it's not at all, I hope you don't take that as a negative, that they've had professional development. It's just we're at a point where I feel they also have this year hired some new teachers and brand new teachers on staff. And I think it would be nice for Martell staff and very helpful as we move forward for Connors, for staff to be more on the same page around the training and restorative practices that we've all had. And given the opportunity to participate in some of the literacy coursework that the district provides. And then again, the trauma and adverse childhood experiences trauma, that's professional development that's available as we are learning more and more that many of our children are coming to us with these high needs. And then the items not in the budget proposal, the Martell budget includes the following reductions. There's one, Steve had asked, or we had asked for one Ed Tech 3 position to support the RTI teacher, and that was reduced. And then there was an additional classroom Ed Tech 3, which was approved last summer, and then is not in the budget now. There were 3 approved last summer, 2 are still in the budget, and 1 is not. That might be the duty aid you were talking about, I'm not sure. So that's all. That's all I have. Did I forget anything?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I have 2 things. One, I wanted to continue the conversation about the RTI teacher. I'm just trying to figure out, so the way that I remember it working is that there was a lot of intervention at Longley within the classroom time. Like we would have intervention blocks. Are you talking about having a teacher with a separate classroom that you've identified specific students who are not special ed but are in maybe a trauma or a different kind of category that they go to? Can you
No.
explain
So
how it works?
remember, so this is for Martell. So 2 things. So you are seeing the intervention block in the master schedule. That would be for all kids. So we've called it What I Need Time or WIN time, but other schools might call it something different. And so kids who are working on standards not at grade level or close to grade level may be getting an intervention of some kind, like reading recovery or a math intervention to catch them up. Other kids might get some sort of enrichment program. They might be doing a web quest on their technology, or where they're self-guided, which are aligned to standards of some kind. An RTI teacher, this is someone who, like Steve mentioned, would help out with kids who aren't being successful in the mainstream. But what happens in elementary schools is when kids are struggling and being having a hard time with their behavior, can't sit still, running around. How am I going to say this without sounding? It's really difficult sometimes to get support for them. Mm-hmm. From not all of those kids are special ed kids.
Right.
And so we have to be creative in finding other ways to support them with regular ed funds
I
or in
understand
some
what you're
other
getting-
way.
I understand what you're getting at there.
Okay.
I'm trying to picture, do students get sent to a classroom where you're saying there's not a lot of space, but
They
you're
could
shifting?
spend part of their day, yes, to
I'm
maybe
just trying to
calm
figure out
down
what
or
this person
I'm
in
sorry,
particular
yes.
will do, because
Yes.
regular ed teachers will pick up those intervention blocks, right? They shift around.
Yes,
Who's got
everyone does. Ed
responsibility?
techs, regular ed.
Right.
This person could have a group in that block as well.
In addition to
Yes.
maybe
Yep.
coordinating, because
Yes.
if it's a whole position. I'm
Yes.
just saying, okay, that's what I was trying to figure out.
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
And I'm sure, Jim and Amber can speak to, this is just something that we agreed Martell needed. And as I get to know the school more as the spring comes, I think my vision for the position honestly will become more clear and how we can make it work for staff and kids.
My second question was about the STEM position. That's, Longley's paying 20 and you're paying 20?
Yes, it'd be a
Okay.
shared position.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just kind of looking around here unsuccessfully to find some info of when we added some of the positions. I guess my concern is with the item not in the proposal, which was one of the ones that we added. Do we know for certain what that position is? Is that something we can find out?
The educational technician position?
Yes, from number 3 in the second handout, the 19,000 for additional classroom ed tech, which was approved in the summer of last year.
That we are using that position in our 5th grade, which has large numbers this year, and it's not in the present budget right now.
Okay, is it determined that it's just not necessary?
It's very useful. We could use it, but there were reductions that needed to be made, and that was the place where we thought we could do the least harm to the program.
Okay. I guess in line with the duty aid, if we could add that to the wish list as well. Thanks, Bobby. Thank you.
I'm just gonna add to the 5th grade right now. We have 26 kids in each class.
Yes.
I should say students.
Yes, that's correct.
And next year we're predicting and hoping that's the same number. Can we possibly look at that in further discussion later? Because I've seen those rooms. Right now we're pretty good. I mean, maybe not 5th grade, but I've seen the 6th grade classes when there's a lot of kids, up to like 26, and it is crowded in those classrooms. And of course, when classroom size is a little bit smaller, we know education is a little bit better. So I don't know, maybe we can, maybe you have something to say about that, and that's where the ed tech can certainly help. I understand that.
We used the additional ed techs from last summer in 5th grade and in 6th grade.
Just maybe we could review that with maybe with Mr. Webster. I know it's always a challenge to figure out class size and so forth, but I know it's a challenge at Martell. Not every year, but in this case it is.
So maybe it's just a review of class size across all elementary, something like that.
Yeah. Ms. Ray?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the response to intervention teacher, I'm sorry, I don't have the Longley proposal in front of me. Will there also be a request for that at Longley? No, just at Martell? And then that would be a shared position. No, it's not.
It was on when I got here. Um, so our goal is to have that one position move forward to Connor School.
Would
So
there,
start because I'm sorry because so I'm not standing up here saying Longley does not need that position, but I'm saying Longley has other things on a higher priority list that I'll share with you in about half hour.
okay. All right, I'll take that.
I'm sorry.
Can I ask a clarifying question on the ed tech, the one that's being removed? So we added 3 last summer. 2 of those are currently in 5th grade and one of them is in 6th grade?
We share them between the 5th and 6th.
All 3 are shared between all.
The 5th and 6th, yes.
And so 2 would carry, with this missing, 2 would carry over to next year and 1 would be dropped? There would still be 2 shared between 5th and 6th grade, or would those 2 be exclusively with 6th
Well, we'd
grade?
look at the numbers, or Christy will look at the numbers in the fall, but I suspect that a lot of that help would go towards the 6th grade because the 6th grade will be large.
Okay, thank you.
So the STEM teacher was STEM a former grant that has now been adopted by the school, or is this
No.
it's just an acronym for the name of that teaching position?
It is. We haven't had right now. What's happening is at teachers across the district. Some schools have time for science built into their day, science and social studies. Some schools don't, so we ask teachers to do as much integrating and teaching across content areas to build it in for kids. This would give us another opportunity to really provide those hands-on learning opportunities for kids. It hasn't been provided through grant monies, though.
If I could just interject here. So about 2, maybe 3 years ago, the school committee set a district goal to enhance science at the elementary level. And we actually provided funds, and it was like $250 per room for the classroom teacher to use for science. And then there was some interest, but also some questions about, gee, if we add STEM teachers, is that going to detract from or enhance the regular classroom experience? And I think it's fair to say is what we've found, it's further enhanced because that STEM teacher is reinforcing what's happening in the classroom, and we're seeing just tremendous student interest in a lot of learning that's now taking place in science, which is kind of was one of the last things we were able to do with all the focus on math and literacy.
And so it's probably too early to tell if you're seeing positive results once they're up in the middle school and high school. Is this, I mean, it's easy. Do we have data to support that this is successful?
I would say it's too new. This is the first year that we've had the experience at Farwell. We also have a position at McMahon. So you're going to see in this budget these additional positions, so we'll now have a STEM program in every elementary school.
Okay. The intervention block, is there a cost to that?
No. It's just creative scheduling.
So Bobby, if you could add the RTI, first let me just throw this out there so that people don't get all nervous. When I throw anything on for questioning, I may have a thought process that might be something that's on a list of a cut, but I never jump right to that. It's just so that we can have further discussion. I expect all department heads, when they present to us, to argue for things passionately, but we have to look at a different picture. But I don't want anyone to ever think that it's because I think that the administrator's going in the wrong direction or something. So, but that's just me personally. I'm not trying to speak for everybody. But I would like the RTI position put on the list. My thinking is that we have a new school being built. Let's just wait till that new school. But I think we should all have further discussion so you can prepare for that. Also, any additional money going into Martell for not remodeling, but upgrades that are not absolutely necessary. So, did you catch both of those, Bobby? All right, thank you. Thank you.
Any further discussion?
Can I ask a clarifying question about this list? Because I don't know what's supposed to go on it now and what's not. I thought it was discuss things that maybe weren't part of the budget proposal, but if they are things that we are wanting to discuss further, what's the list for? Because I want STEM on it for every single thing that everybody presents for STEM. That's my wish list. But I don't know if it's appropriate to put that there. You just said the RTI thing, which was already part of it. So
we're creating this list as a reminder in the future when we come back to do a budget review that you can have a dialogue about things. So if you want STEM on the list, we can certainly put it on there to have that discussion in the future.
yes, please.
Okay.
Thank you.
Ms. Roy, just to clarify, so this idea is coming from City Council where we keep a list running throughout the whole budget process to remind us just to go back. So if it's on here or not, like there's no qualifier. It's just like, I'm going to fight for this when this comes up again. So it's just kind of a reminder for it, that sort of thing.
Ms. Clark, if you don't mind, if I may be upsetting the next presenter, but if you wanted to present, I just need to ask my parliamentarian if that's okay to go out of order, if you are prepared to do that.
We need a 2/3 vote.
Your mic's on.
All right. See, got to be quick on that one. I just think we need to be a bit relaxed with parliamentary rules. We shouldn't be doing 2/3 votes if we just want someone who's standing at the podium. So Robert's rules, I think, was written in a way that allows for flexibility somewhat. So, but good job on being on top of it every time. Sorry.
I know the rule. That's all I'm saying. We don't have to necessarily follow it because of MSBA handbook. So whatever.
I just being sensitive to your role, and I
like
just
rules.
appreciate that. Do you want to follow? We can follow the rules. No? Okay, I'm just feeling adventurous today. So it's up to you, Ms. Clark. Would you like
I'm
to
ready, if you're ready.
All right.
Mr. Chairman, if I may just say one last thing, I'd like to thank Christy and Sarah and her entire staff. We spent, Martell staff and I have spent a lot of time with them this year at different professional development. Most of the time at Longley, and that's mainly because of parking. But they've been extremely welcoming, and the staff it's helped with feeling good about the integration to come. So I'd like to thank them.
Thank you. Yes, there's no doubt this has been a bit of an interesting situation for me too, just standing up here, because Steve's been really great about welcoming us as well, and for me not to feel like I'm moving in too quickly. So kudos to you as well, Steve. All right, so now we'll switch hats. I'll put on my Longley hat. I'll have Sarah come up here with me and bring our Longley handouts. Okay, everyone ready? Okay, so first I would like to start on behalf of the entire Longley School community. I want to thank the board for your service. I always like to take this night to do that. I know you're in for a difficult budget season, but hopefully I feel like with the administrators in Lewiston, it will be a really positive process. And so thank you for your support for our school and for your service to our community. The first page is our school profile. It's the same format as the other handouts you've received. You will see that we do have, we share Unified Arts teachers with Martell and with Farwell, so that's unique for us. Give you some time to look down through that. I think one of the pieces to this that does make Longley unique is our collaboration with Promise Early Education Center for pre-K. And so we have pre-K staff on here, although they are not Lewiston Public School employees, they are Promise employees, although they're also Longley staff. even if they don't get a paycheck from Lewiston Public Schools, they're treated as Longley staff, and they definitely are part of our team. We also have, for a school of 387 students, we have some mental health support that works out of our building, although we only have one of those people on staff, and that is our one Lewiston Public School clinician under the special ed budget. The other clinicians and case managers are local agencies that come and work out of our building to support kids. This year, we're really fortunate to have case managers one from MERS and one from Spurwink that work with our local multicultural case managers.
If I could just interrupt, because you raised a good point about Promise. So we have a partnership with Promise, and one of the nice things about it is that we get to count that student for full state subsidy, and a similar situation exists at McMahon and also at Montello. So it's a good partnership that's worked out quite well.
And actually, I'm not going to go into detail, but it is a state recognized, the Longley partnership with Promise and our pre-K expansion is state recognized program where we are receiving a lot of kudos for that. So you'll get more information for that this spring when it's no longer budget season. So that's our staff. And then on the second page, or on the back side of that, we go into our class sizes. One of the things we've been very fortunate at Longley over the years to keep our class sizes very low comparative to the other elementary schools. And I think it's no surprise that the reason for that is because of the students that we serve at Longley. It is a unique population in comparative to the other elementary schools. And you look at the number of children that qualify for free and reduced lunch, and I will say at Longley it is 100% that qualify. They may not all qualify for free, but they would qualify for reduced, if not free. The other key point I do want to share, our special ed percentage and our 504 percentage has pretty much stayed either the same or gone down from years past, and our ELL percentage continues to rise. I will say that 66% of our student population are considered limited English proficient, or they qualify for ELL services. And what I didn't put on here is another key part. So I love to talk about ELL, and so maybe you don't know, but I was the director before Hillary. And so I always look at within our ELL child, and as a learner, there are different levels of English proficiency. And so when I talk about 254 ELL students at Longley, they're not all middle of the road or fluent. Longley has 62 of those 254 kiddos have been in the country 2 years or less. So that is 24% of our ELL kids. So just another figure to let you know. So it's not that that's bad necessarily. That just it's an opportunity for us to be creative, to provide opportunities for learning opportunities for them, and they're the kids that honestly grow a ton in a year academically and in their English. And so I point that out because I don't want us to forget about them. And that is another reason when you have a percentage of 66% of your student population, that's why we have an ELL teacher at every grade level, and they're part of that grade level's team. They participate in the common planning, they participate in the same recess duties. And this year, through the ELL budget, Hillary and I, a year ago, we implemented an ELL instructional coach at Longley, specific for Longley, to help mainstream teachers and ELL teachers support teaching strategies and students. She also does some interventions as well with ELL kids. And so my hope is that, again, all of this staff will come together with Martel when we merge and move forward to Connors School, because our kids will be more in a blend, in a mix, and the needs will still be there. So one more point about the newcomers, that boils down to 16% of my school students have been in the country 2 years or less. And that has gone down from last year, though. Last year it was like 24%. I checked the numbers this morning. Key highlights. I'm going to let Sarah talk about the PD a little bit we've done with Martel, and about our work with the Restorative Justice Institute of Maine.
Hi, so just quickly, 2 things to share with you. As Steve and Christy noted earlier, we've really enjoyed having the Martel staff come over to Longley for most of our PLCs and all of our early release time. And not only are we doing the professional development goals of the year, we're spending a lot of time on PBL work, teachers getting comfortable with Empower, sitting with grade level teams that are mixed between Martel and Longley grade levels to look at standards, look at evidence, and kind of calibrate our work. So we're looking at evidence, student work samples, and looking at them together. Are we expecting the same things from students? So we're getting to know each other as professionals, but we're getting to know each other as people too. So it's been a great community building time that we've really gotten to know each other. And the ed techs come over every early release as well, and I've gotten to spend a lot of time with the ed techs and mixing them up in small groups and doing a lot of our social emotional learning initiatives with them, and that's been great to see. Those 2 staffs have a lot more in common than I think they realized, and they've been getting along well. And so we're very excited to continue this professional development time next year with the 2 staffs. And one of my second point is one of our main focuses is restorative practices. And so Martel started that work this year with us, and so next year they'll be in year 2 of their implementation of restorative practices, and Longley will move into year 3. So Longley this year spent a lot of time working on an implementation team with the trainers from the Restorative Justice Institute. That will be a team that will be mentors for new teachers next year, so really developing a leadership team among our teachers to do this work. So it's really reduced. At Longley, we've seen a lot of reduction in our out-of-school suspensions because of the restorative work, so we're excited to keep on that. Thank you. Yeah.
And then I asked Sarah to talk about the pre-K expansion, but she knows it's like my baby. And so when you talk about what you'll stand up here and advocate for, and what I always think about early childhood education as the mountain that I would die on advocating for, in terms of being an educator and seeing the big picture in education. And in my opinion, early funding that goes to early childhood education is you get the most bang for your buck. And we're seeing that at Longley in terms of we are finishing year 4 in a pre-K expansion grant that we were awarded when I started at Longley. What that means is our pre-K program runs 5 days a week from 8 to 1. And we offer summer programming for those 4-year-olds. And so we also are servicing kiddos who've never been in any kind of daycare or school before they hit the Longley classroom. And so it's really given us a powerful opportunity to make a difference for some of our kids, give them some home supports if needed through that work with Head Start, Promise. So that collaboration, they offer some supports for 4-year-olds that Lewiston Public Schools might not be able to if it was just a regular public pre-K classroom in terms of kids and their needs. And so that is, I just wanted to share with you that will continue. Next year's our last year in the grant through the pre-K expansion grant. So our Longley budget additions all relate to what you've already heard tonight in terms of the STEM teacher that we've talked a little bit in length. We'll share with Martel. we'd like to share with Martel if you approve it. The next item on the things we're requesting is a social worker. We're really finding at Longley that even though we have some mental health support on staff or that work out of the building, we need more. We need more. Our kids are struggling in terms of their mental health needs, and I think we're seeing it across our schools. It's not just a Longley concern. I think kids were realizing, the ACEs, kids with adverse childhood experiences, it always was an issue in the medical profession, and now we're seeing it as an educational issue because of the impacts that living in high-stress homes, which is usually correlated with poverty, not always, but usually correlated with poverty, and what that does to a child's developing brain. And so our goal is to add another social worker in the regular ed budget because we have kids that need more than just what our guidance counselor can provide, but yet may not have an opportunity to get picked up through one of the clinicians that are on staff. And then the next two bullets, instructional supplies for the new teaching positions, books and periodicals. And then the last bullet is, you may think, whoa, that's a big chunk. However, when we, it's the $102,000 increase for pre-K programming per the pre-K expansion grant requirements. So when we signed on for this grant 4 years ago as part of the terms, and Mr. Webster can help explain this as well if I'm being confusing, but we agreed to work towards sustaining this type of a program so that we could still continue to run the program once the grant monies ended. And so that is what this percentage is, what the difference is between the total cost of the program at this point and the FY19 grant award that we're anticipating.
And maybe I could just add just a little bit to that. Before this grant, our pre-K model in Lewiston was a half-day program, 4 days per week. So a pre-K teacher would have one class in the morning, one in the afternoon, and then they would typically have Fridays to do planning and other things with the school. What the research shows and what the pre-K grant supported was going to a more all-day program. And so Longley has an all-day program, and the new school is designed assuming that all-day program will go in there. So we're expecting, we've got, I think, actually 6 pre-K rooms in that facility. So not a half-day program, but at least we call it an all-day program. It's not the full 6.5 hours or whatever that a higher grade student would be in the classroom, but it
I'm sorry. I know you probably asked for that, and in my mind, I see them. It's really hard for me to put labels on kids.
Ms. Roy kind of touched on it. The contracted services with Tree Street. Is this a yearly contract, or is this just a one-time thing?
It's been a yearly contract, Ms. Hutchinson, since I've been at Longley. It has. So when I reflect back, not to take too much time because I know you have a long night, but some of the students that have worked through that Tree Street 6 to 8 week, it's an intervention. It's really a last ditch effort to see if we can give some of our kids this skill set to be successful in school before having to go to a referral. And I can honestly tell you, I know middle school students right now who are there that we have saved, I say we've saved them because because some of our kids spend a lot of time at Tree after school, and for them to know that their teachers are as cool as some of the Tree Street people are, and know them, and that we're working together, and that I know Julia and Julia knows me, and the parents have that connection between both of us. For some kids, it really has made a difference, and I think about some of our kids, we honestly have saved them because now they see. Whenever kids know that they have adults in their lives that are there for them, and honestly, they can't get away with anything because we're all on the same team, it does make a difference.
Follow up, if I may. Could we add this to the list for further discussion if it's working in Longley? We've already heard that some of our downtown kids are at other schools, and maybe we should look at possibly spreading this out a little bit more.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Two things. First, a question. Regarding the summer program cuts of a teacher in ed tech, what's going to be the actual impact on the summer program?
I'm hopeful I can pick that up through Title I. So hopefully it won't have an negative impact.
It's fantastic. The other is just more of a general comment for the board. I believe I heard from Ms. Mates at the middle school and possibly another elementary school teacher, or principal, excuse me, about the need for, kind of like stated here, the PASS program, some kind of alternative for suspending students. I don't know if that's maybe a further conversation we can have as a board as to what we could do. Should we have something at each individual school? Maybe we could have one district-wide, like teacher in ed tech, instead of having one at each school, just district-wide to consolidate. I don't know how financially feasible it would be to have one at each school. And then maybe possibly look into combining the middle and high school for the suspension diversion program, because I know that extra ed tech is in the budget for next year. So maybe at some point in time we could have a future conversation about this at a regular meeting and kind of decide what's the best course of action, what's most financially feasible and effective, of course. Something to keep in mind. Thanks. No, I guess this would be more of a general discussion, unless
We could add it as a future agenda topic, the whole issue of suspension diversion K-12, I think is what you're saying.
So that Luke brings up a good subject. I wonder if maybe we could just have somebody look at our whole budget and kind of, are there services that we've really separated between schools that we could bring back more district-wide for feasibility? So I would just ask you to maybe do a quick scan or give it some thought, and then if there might be other programs that we could do the same thing where have some savings. So Bill, this might be more for you, but so I notice every school has food service, and I apologize for my ignorance on this, but so we have a master kitchen, I would assume, at the high school, is that?
So all our schools have full service kitchens and are self-sufficient, except for Longley, where there is some prep work done at the high school and then it goes down to Longley. But and we can have at some point a presentation by Alyssa Roman, the nutrition director, we probably have one of the most comprehensive and most efficient programs in the state. But for schools that have 250, 300, in many cases our schools are 600, 700, 800 more, having a full service kitchen fully staffed is cost effective. Just one other thing I might mention though, we do service something like 20 sites in the summer under a summer nutrition program, and that food comes out of the high school.
Is there a cost to the restorative justice program overall?
The program being implemented, no. The cost is, we have a year ago in the Longley budget, if you look in Article 5, I think it is, you'll see Longley PD line. That's where we have contracted services with the Restorative Justice Institute of Maine, and where they come and do that consulting with us. And it has purchased books that we've done, book studies with staff around. That's the cost. The cost is in the training.
So every school has had costs? I'm asking you.
So I don't know what the other schools have. I will say that I know Jim Cliff can speak to the work that's happened at Montello School over the last several years, but at the elementary level, Longley and Montello, I think, took this on initially together. And then with the success we've seen, it has, Bill can speak to the district expectation.
Yeah, we can get some more information, but my recollection, it was in the $2,000, $2,500 per school in terms of the support that's happening this year. And some of the schools also had some additional grants available to enhance that work.
And how long have they been working with the district?
I want to say you've been working with Restorative Justice for what, the last 2 years?
Yes.
Yes. And most schools have been working with them for a year, although Montello worked with another firm for at least 1, if not 2 years prior.
And so has it been evaluated? Is there anything to support that it's successful and we should keep moving in that direction?
Yeah, I think when Montello does their presentation, they could at least give a brief summary on the impact on office referrals and suspension rates.
Longley suspension rates are like down by 50% before we implemented restorative. I mean, we've seen huge difference. Yeah, I mean, since we've implemented restorative.
So the suspensions may be down, but are the behaviors actually being
So,
corrected? Because
so great question. And I would love for you to come spend a day with us. Just because I said kids don't learn or when they're suspended or that doesn't change behavior does not mean they're not suspended. I also want my teachers and students to feel safe at Longley. That's my top priority, aside from them obviously achieving and learning and growing. That is, when you read any research around restorative justice and restorative practices, that is the struggle for schools, is to balance that, because you want kids and staff to feel safe, but yet you also have to work with the kids who are struggling to help them change and learn from their behavior so that they don't end up in the juvenile justice system and dropping out of high school. And so we do suspend out when it's an extreme case. Severe violence toward student or staff, obviously any weapons, that it's typically violence and aggressive behavior that kids get suspended for at Longley. And then we work closely with parents before they're allowed back in the learning environment. They might spend a day or two in ISS coming back, where they really have to think about their behavior and restore it with not only their teacher or the person they've harmed, maybe their class. So we've really... And you know what? This is my 28th year, and I'm still learning and growing too, because you know what? My first instinct is to say, oh, they're out. They just did that. But really, it's a philosophical shift around changing behavior for the better and giving kids the ownership of that mistake, and then having the power to then make it right. Especially, it's hard for a 9-year-old to stand up against their teacher and say, I'm sorry that I was disrespectful to you. That's much more powerful than sending them home for the afternoon.
So are you seeing a pattern change in behaviors for the better, besides the less suspensions?
I would say for a lot of kids, yes. I would say there's some kids that still need more than that. They need some more intensive work, whether it be with a clinician or family support or us just continuing to be consistent. And you know what would be great is if you guys could come to the schools and talk to the staff who are doing the hard work in the classrooms, and they can give you an honest opinion on what they see. A lot of it is teachers building those relationships with kids in a way so that kids then kids are learning. We have to teach behavior as much as we have to teach everything else.
Yeah, and so the struggle with us is we have to justify to the taxpayers
I
that
understand.
we're investing in a program that's actually we can prove is making a difference.
Yeah.
So
I would challenge the board to think about the cost of kids and the public, the cost of kids in the juvenile justice system. I think that's a much higher cost than what we're asking for. That's the way I try to think about it.
Well, no, I believe you're right. I believe it is significantly, but if you've ever attended some of their meetings, you don't leave there thinking that there's any discipline in some of those meetings outside of the school, the restorative justice. So, again, we have to justify programs, especially at the dollar amount that we are suggesting. And then one more question: the social worker. Do you have numbers on students? How many students that would be served by this social worker?
I do not, but right now our social workers are maxed out and there's a waiting list, and they serve, our clinicians have anywhere from 20, 25 to 30 kids on their caseload. And we have waiting lists.
So do you have one, or do you share one?
I have one that she services just special ed kids with an IEP.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for taking the time and probably standing near the longest consecutive
My
week
pleasure.
this evening.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Appreciate all the work you put into it. At this time, we're going to take a 5-minute recess, and we'll be back shortly.